Hey everybody, we're coming to you today from Sage Future. I'm joined here by Katie Drummond, the Director of Global Editorial Content for Wired Magazine. And she and I have just come off the main stage after giving a keynote about AI and where AI is going to take the business in the future, what we're going to build for the future with our customers. I thought it would be great, after being on stage together, to have a little bit more of an intimate conversation where I could ask questions that I want to ask.
Okay, go for it.
So I want to start with one that I think, is like everybody wants to know the answer and almost nobody knows the answer. But if anybody knows the answer, it's going to be you. So that question is, how do you see AI transforming the workplace in the next 5 years in terms of how people will actually experience work?
That is a question we could spend 2 hours talking about and debating. There's a lot there. And I think one of the most interesting things about the moment that we're in terms of defining the future of AI and work is that so much of it, to your point, is to be determined. And I think what's important to understand is that it is to be determined by the people leading these businesses and leading these companies, right? There's a version of that future where so many different functions are automated away, right? And the people experiencing the work are fewer and fewer between. There's another version of work that I think is really exciting, right? Where people's experience of work involves so much more of sort of a supervisory capacity over the drudgery, right? Like the stuff that can be automated that you don't actually want to spend your time doing. You don't have to spend your time doing that anymore. In a lot of white collar instances, that can be delegated to artificial intelligence. And then your experience of work is hopefully a much more fulfilling, much more creative, much more human-to-human endeavor, because you're able to actually experience work in a way that feels balanced, in a way where you're building skills that an AI can't replicate. But so much of that sort of back-end drudgery disappears. And then we haven't even started to get into sort of the new job creation that's possible with AI, right? There are so many different roles and functions across industries that AI has the potential to unlock. So certainly we're talking about the potential for certain roles to be automated, but there's this really exciting counterbalance to that, which is new roles actually being created. And so entirely new work experiences existing as a result of that.
Yeah, so speaking of the new roles to be created, when I first heard that there was this new category of worker called a prompt engineer.
Yes.
I'm like, how is that a thing? How is it that we've got to train people on how to write English words and, to control the way we interact with AI. I mean, it just was mind blowing to me. And yet here we are, as I've learned how to write code that interacts with AI, I find that sure enough, like I've got to really hone my skills as a prompt engineer.
It's like an entire specialty, and across different disciplines, you will need people with different areas of expertise to not only to fine tune the models, right, but to actually educate an entire workforce in prompt engineering and sort of how that should work, and then to actually sort of own that piece of work yourself is a very intricate job. I mean, it's not enough to just ask a question of a fine-tuned LLM. You need to know exactly how to ask it, exactly what the follow-up needs to be. I mean, there's like a science to it. And I think that the development of that science in the years to come is going to be really, really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would liken it to learning how to be really effective working with an analyst or a researcher on your staff.
Yeah, totally.
It's kind of like that. You got to be clear and precise.
Yep.
Okay, so that's a great segue to the next question. And that is, what do you see as the skills that are going to be the most valuable in the future?
Well, adaptability, I think, is one huge one. This is such a moment of transformation. And I think what I worry about in the workforce are people who are just stuck in a certain way of doing things, right? I think adaptability at work is always really important, but I think now more than ever, it's not just a willingness to try new things and try new technologies, but an enthusiasm about it, right? Someone who wants to be proactive about experimenting with new technology, proactive about adopting it, and excited about that. Like that's someone who will be very successful moving forward. So there's that piece of it in terms of how we are interacting with tech at work. But I think the other piece of it that I love, so I'm a manager, I manage a lot of people. I love management. I love the challenge of it. I love the nuance of it. I love the human to human interconnectivity. And I think that a lot of those skills, right, sort of like managerial skills, empathy, nuance, communication, even sort of like context, that's going to become really, really important. And I think those skills will become very, very valuable as more of what we do is automated, there will be an opportunity for more people to develop those skills. And I think there will be a real premium on those skills because people will want and need that human interaction when they're spending so much time with automated systems.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting to think that, in the future, everyone's going to have to kind of develop those managerial supervisory roles, develop their skills interacting, because, that's that ability to sort of coordinate and communicate and align is really what's going to sort of set apart people who are super effective with AI from everybody else.
For sure. And I would also say too, I mean, critical thinking, I think is something, even in the context of AI in education, people worry a lot about like young people losing their critical thinking skills. And I think on the contrary, that's going to be so much more important because you need to think very critically whenever you're interacting with AI, right? That those skills are as important, if not more, interacting with automated systems as they are interacting with humans.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of prompt engineering is learning when to challenge AI, when to dig deeper, when to probe, and that does sort of unlock that critical thinking or requires that critical thinking.
Yeah.
So there's something that's on my mind, and I think it's on a lot of people's mind. And, I'm a very hopeful person when it comes to the impact technology can have on the future. But I don't have my head in the sand. There are some genuine concerns. AI is getting better and better and better at deep fakes, at, imitating real human behavior, impersonating someone that we know. And what worries me is that, as a species, right, we're sort of founded, like what sets us apart is our ability to trust, right? It's our ability to believe something that's told to us and to trust in institutions and organizations.
Yeah.
And I believe that journalism has a huge role to play in how we navigate this. So I hope I'm not leading the witness too much here, but I guess the question to you is, what role do you see journalists playing, with this, and sort of how do you act as the storytellers that guide us through this such a disruptive and transformative phase?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and particularly for the industry of journalism, which is of itself being disrupted by AI, right? I mean, so there's this sort of like ironic meta challenge that we're dealing with while we're also trying to cover the technology itself. I mean, I think there are a few pieces to that, and a big piece points to sort of the optimism that you just highlighted from your own point of view, which is, I think journalists have a responsibility to not to be optimistic. I think Wired has a responsibility to be optimistic, but to help people just understand the technology. Why is it so interesting? What should they be curious about? How can we make something that might feel inaccessible or confusing, whether it's an LLM or agentic AI, how can we make that accessible to the audience, to the average everyday reader who doesn't work in tech? How can we help them just understand what's happening, how it works, and then how it's affecting different parts of the way they live, or how it will potentially affect their work, their experience with healthcare, their experience with education, all of these different facets. So there's sort of the explanatory piece of it and making that feel really accessible. And then to your other point, there's the accountability piece of it, right? Where we're looking at the companies that are creating this technology. We're looking at the policymakers in government who are regulating this technology. We're looking at how AI and AI-generated information or mis and disinformation are proliferating across the internet. And so there's that really important piece too of holding the makers of the technology and the regulators to account for how they are or are not allowing AI to sort of infiltrate different aspects of our lives without being thoughtful and cautious about how the technology is used. And I think, again, it's not to say that AI should not be deployed and should not be used, but it's really asking hard questions about what are we doing to safeguard this actually, and to make sure what's so important to me is that these are tools for a better lived experience for people. So how are the companies and the regulators making sure that that is the case? And so I think there's two pieces of it. It's making the tech feel really accessible, hopefully providing some optimism and making, the excitement around this and trying to capture that, but then also sort of like the real world implications where the rubber meets the road about where is this actually taking us as a species, to your point.
Yeah, I really love the point you made about how journalism as an industry can act as a check against big tech, and just how incredibly valuable that is for society to have people who are totally focused on ensuring, right, holding people to account, but also what you said, kind of toning down the anxiety that's natural as you go through a big change like this. And so being able to explain it, help people to understand, sort of giving them a view to the future while simultaneously holding the people building it, right, accountable, I think is huge.
Well, we'll do our best.
I appreciate that. Well, thank you. It's been really, really nice talking to you. Thanks again for joining us at the conference. I told the audience I've been a fan of Wired magazine since the 90s.
That's very kind.
I've read every issue, cover to cover. So this is a big moment for me to have you here with me.
Oh, thank you for having me. This has been great.
Thank you.